All right, my name is Steve McCown. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I served in Vietnam in the 68-69 year. I was with the 101st Airborne Division with the 2nd of the 327th Infantry there. I served as an infantry rifleman. Before that, before I went to Vietnam, I did my basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. It's in central Missouri. I took my advanced training at Fort Ord, California, out near Monterey and not far from San Francisco. I served 2 years in the service. When I came back from Vietnam, I served at Fort Riley, Kansas, where I earned the 1st Infantry Division patch. I was there for 6 months, where I was honorably discharged. Currently, I'm a junior vice commander with our VFW Post 1499. When you see this headgear, that indicates that it's a veteran of foreign wars wearing that. We shortened that to the VFW. On each of our caps, each member will typically wear some memorabilia, some pins and things that relate to his service to the United States. This is the VFW logo. It's the patch that identifies the person as a VFW member. I have some things that probably are going to be a little bit difficult to see from this distance or even handle, but okay, this is just Vietnamese money and coins. That's back to civilization. One of these tags will be taken. One will be left on the soldier's body, and that way they're accountable for that soldier, and record is made that this soldier died in service of the branch of military he was in. There's a couple of and this one's called Bronze Star. I can use this then. Okay, excellent. This was me back in 1968 when I first came. That was taken in advanced training. There was my M16. This is a typical scene in Vietnam, kind of a peacetime, for them. Peaceful scene near rice paddies. There's quite a bit of water in the lowlands in Vietnam. This is some of their coins and cash that they used, their money. Let me see, I'm sorry, I'm probably blocking everything. Again, that's the Purple Heart there on the right. and the Bronze Star. I was awarded about 7 different medals. A very important one, especially to Vietnam, was the Vietnam service. This was a medal that was given by the Republic of South Vietnam for our service in that country. And each soldier received that medal. Yeah, I'm ready for those. I brought about 21 slides to kind of explain my tour and the equipment that we used in Vietnam that helped me come back, helped our soldiers come back and in defense of our troops in the country. This is my unit. This is the first sign I saw, kind of a makeshift sign at Camp Eagle, which was in northern South Vietnam near Da Nang. This is my unit, the 101st Airborne Division. This was my infantry unit, the 2nd Battalion, 327th Infantry. Our motto was no slack. Press the button. Just touch. If it's working, but of course nothing's working. Yeah, that'll be fine. This is the unit crest of the 2nd Battalion, 327th Infantry that I was with. Pretty much all I have to say about that. This is an example. Being assigned to the 101st Airborne, we were at that time called Air Mobile. We moved around instead of marching to our next area of combat. About 6 or 7 of us would mount up in these are called Huey helicopters, the UH-1 Huey helicopter. We would, with all of our gear and everything, get into this portion of the helicopter. This man here is called a door gunner. There's one on each side of the helicopter. They attempted to defend and with their machine guns, attempted to defend the gunship. These are examples of us, this helicopter's landing, and these are troops that are defending the helicopter as it lands. The next one. This is kind of out of order, but this is an example of a what's called a sea ration kit. This is what we ate. I'm going to say about 95% of the time in Vietnam. It came in a box. There were, I think, seven different meals that we ate. These were the various different cans that we needed to open to prepare the food. There was everything from ham and eggs to spaghetti and meatballs. And in this pack there was eating utensils and sugar, pepper, condiments, that kind of thing. I'll get to how we opened those down the road here. It's yes, the next one. Next one's fine. This is a Huey gunship Cobra helicopter. It was our number one defense aircraft in Vietnam. It was loaded with rockets in this portion. this is a minigun in front here. It was heavily armored vehicle, very narrow vehicle, so that it would be a smaller target to the enemy from the ground. This was our #1 defense aircraft in Vietnam. We were able to call this unit in by radio, and we could get any kind of armaments, or I should say weapons that we can use against the enemy from the air. Yeah, let's go to this one. This is a close-up of the door gunner and our Huey gunships. This was an M60 machine gun here. You see the rounds, belt-fed machine gun, and the real macho guys requested to be on these Huey helicopters to defend the gunship. It was quite a sight to see the 2 machine guns firing from helicopter right above you. Next. This is. That's okay. I just threw this in there. This is the area that I was mostly worked in. Our unit mostly worked in what was called the Ashaw Valley. It was an area that was west of Da Nang, toward the Laotian border. It was a wild area, had lowlands and mountains, and we tried to cover that with our different airborne units in Vietnam. That was my primary objective while I was there, and the year I was there. Okay. This is our other piece of very important equipment. This is a F-4 Phantom jet. It was a fighter bomber. It dropped napalm bombs and just regular bombs, and was capable of firing its 20 millimeter cannon on the front. But we could call this in by radio and give it grid coordinates in the area where the enemy, where we knew the enemy was, and planes, quite often more than one, would come in and bomb or napalm bomb these areas to get the enemy's head down. We called him Charlie. It was kind of a universal name that we called the enemy. We just nicknamed him Charlie. So anyway, this was a very powerful, very fast jet of that era. This is an example of helicopter assault. There would be many in the air. You can see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Huey H-1 helicopters. This is what we flew in on. We would land typically in a lowland area, but we would also land in a mountainous region up on top. It just depended on what our objective. But they would land either land one after another, and we would jump from these helicopters probably 8 to 10 feet, which was quite a trick with carrying. You carry about it's probably 50 to 60 pounds on your back all the time. So anyway, this is called a helicopter assault. This is what I did about half the time. I mean, the other half the time was spent, marching through and trying to find the enemy. It was called search and destroy at the time. And this was another similar picture in a wooded region. This guy's getting ready to dismount this helicopter. I just thought I'd throw that in. This was another artist rendering of the assault mode. Another one. This one's of the soldiers loading up on the helicopters. Again, typically there would be we would typically have about 6 to 7 men, plus the helicopter crew on that helicopter. So we're talking 10 men total on the helicopter, each helicopter. Okay. This is the weapon I carried. My MOS, or my military occupation, was infantry rifleman. This is an AR-16 or M16, as you might know it. This is in a modified version. This is still used in the Middle East today. But it has been modified. It's been shortened. It uses the same 22 or 23 caliber, 223 caliber ammunition. This is a picture of that M60 that I showed you that was mounted in the helicopter. We had one of these. It's an M60 30 caliber machine gun, which a strong guy can carry this weapon along with all the belt-fed rounds. The other members of the squad would carry his ammunition. He carried 100 rounds typically, and he carried that thing like I carried the M16, which was like it was like 6-7 pounds. This was with all the ammunition, it weighed probably 15 pounds, so or more. I'm not really sure how much it weighed, but it was quite a load for us as we trampled our way through rice paddies and mountain regions. This is a very, very important helicopter. This was another UH-1, but this was outfitted with medical personnel, and it was like the ambulance of the sky in Vietnam. We called it the medevac helicopter, and that's short for medical evacuation. It would come in and pick up as many wounded as it could in the back, and carry them off to safety and to get medical help, medical surgical help. This, I happen to have one in my pocket still. This is called a P-38. This is a can opener that we used to open all of those sea rations that I showed you earlier. This looks very large in this picture, but it's only about this large. It's only about probably 2 inches long, or if that. But it was very effective in opening our cans, and so we get the food out and be nourished. This is the 101st Airborne Patch. This was the unit that I served in Vietnam with. I was assigned there as I came into the country. I had no idea I would be assigned to an airborne unit there. But about 2 weeks after I was in country, I was assigned to the 101st Airborne, and we flew up to Da Nang, and I got started on my 1-year tour in Vietnam. This is everything that I carried for my year in Vietnam. This is the M16 I was telling you about. This is the belt ammunition for the machine gun that I showed you earlier. We carried 8 of these canteens. They were, you can't see them in this picture, but we carried a couple on our belts, and probably about 6 more hanging all over our what's called a rucksack. Like I said, this was about a 50 to 60 pound, depending on how much fresh, sea rations we had in there and how much water we were carrying. In other words, we emptied these canteens in about, Vietnam was very warm, very hot and humid, and we needed that water. This was our bedding right here. I could have brought that. One of these rolls is a poncho. It's a plastic, good-sized poncho. This other roll here was something called what was it called? A poncho liner. It was called a poncho liner. It was made out of nylon. It was kind of our blanket. This kept us from sleeping on the ground, the wet ground, the poncho. Of course, it also served as a poncho. When it rained over there, we actually put the poncho on. I mean, it had a little hood on it. You've probably seen ponchos of other types here in the States. But very, very important piece of equipment. The mosquitoes were horrible over there, and we could drape this very light nylon blanket over us as we slept. Typically, we would pull guard once a night for a couple of hours every night in Vietnam. Next. This was an example of the decoration and painting of this particular helicopter. Was a Huey Cobra gunship. They had a lot of fun painting these aircraft with everything from pinups to faces like this that were intended to scare the enemy and get his attention. Again, this was one of those very high mountain landing zones that we had. Here's a guy jumping off this landing rudder that was on the bottom of these things, and we would just disembark here. They wouldn't usually touch down at all. They just hovered here, and we would jump off. All that happened as quickly as possible. The enemy was always around, and I think this closes out the series of slides. But this is a question that a lot of veterans ask themselves. And it's the question of, while others died around you. While others died around you, you wonder, why wasn't I one of the ones that was shot or, blown away? So that's a question that that veterans of all branches of service have to deal with if they encountered death in their tour. And I think that's pretty much all I have If you have any questions, I will try to answer questions. Yes? I'm sorry. A mini helicopter? Oh, one in the distance? In the distance, yeah. Yeah, it was probably just another helicopter of the same type, much further back. Yep. Speaking of helicopters, I saw one this morning. Yes. Yeah, there are different types of helicopters that fly over base here. I've noticed them. They have the twin rotor type, which is called a Chinook helicopter. We had those in Vietnam as well. I was over there for a 1-year tour. 1 year. Yep. I'm sorry. Okay. Did you ever get to fly a plane? Did I fly? Fly in the helicopters? We'll get to fly it? No, that's another special occupation to be a helicopter pilot or to pilot aircraft. That's another what we call an MOS, military occupation. We didn't I'm sure it happened over there, but we didn't typically fire our weapons out of the helicopter. The door gunners did, though. As we flew in, they would typically be firing at a tree line or if there were any enemy in sight. We usually tried to, land where there weren't any known enemies to fire on us at the time. What does the Purple Heart stand for? The Purple Heart means that you shed blood for the country. How many years did you serve now? 2 years. 2 years. I was drafted. I was a draftee. At the time, they had a draft. What's it called? A draft program. And I was drafted in May of '68. We would see some Marine helicopters, some different type. They're a whole different type of helicopter. I didn't have any pictures of them here today. But and then there's equipment helicopters that were they were much larger rotor span, many more blades on them that were capable of picking up like tanks and artillery pieces. And those are the helicopters that would move that type of equipment to a fire base. Fire base, that was our term for usually a hilltop unit, artillery unit that would have mounted all around it artillery pieces, 105 and maybe even up to 10-inch guns that would fire out into areas again where we could call in artillery on the enemy. So, are you a Marine or like Army? I'm sorry, I probably never said that. I was in the United States Army Infantry. Yes. I just went to. Well, with training, I went to, like I say, I was in Missouri at Fort Leonard Wood. I was in California, peacetime, and then yeah, just Vietnam as uh, a wartime location. Yes, our current commander, Phil Jenkins, is a Vietnam veteran. Fred Box is a Vietnam veteran, former post commander. Uh, is that right? Is that right? And Ed Bush, yeah, he's a good buddy of ours. He's currently post quartermaster. So there are quite a few. Vietnam era vets. There's probably more of them in the VFW, associated with VFW now than any other, military era. We have a few World War II remaining, and a few Korea era vets also. I think next week, Wilbur Grisham is scheduled to talk to you all, and he's a World War II veteran. So, yeah, they're kind of passing away as time goes on. Yeah.
What's the coolest thing?
The coolest thing? Well, that's a tough one. I have to say that one of the coolest things I was as a soldier was seeing these aircraft fly in and defend us. We would call these aircraft in, these helicopters, the Cobras, and they would come in and fire their rockets, and just one after another they would shoot. They would fire probably 20 rockets into a tree line. They also had a grenade launcher, and it was kind of an automatic belt-fed grenade launcher. It would fire grenades that were about this big around, and they looked like a big bullet. And they would fire those in defense of our troops as well. And I mean, there were a lot of times that weren't filled with combat over there too. And Vietnam is really quite beautiful. It's tropical. It's very lush and green. There's mountains and lowlands. There's rice paddies that are a beautiful green color. But it was kind of a mixture. It was mixed feelings about the experience. But thanks for asking. Yes. I left the service in May of 1970. Honorably discharged. You don't officially leave the service. You're on kind of more or less standby for them to call you back in if they really need you for about 6 years.
How old were you?
I was 20 years old in that picture that you saw, one of the first slides. I was 20 years old at the time when I went into service.
How old were you when you started training?
About 20 years old. I turned 21 in the service, as a matter of fact. I went to college for, I think about a year. So I was probably a little bit older. Well, not necessarily. Well, I've had a lot of Vietnam buddies in Vietnam that were in their 20s, in their early 20s, mid-20s even. Yes?
I think what I'd like for these kids to realize is I lived in that era too, and unfortunately, we did not come home a war hero. People were rebelling against the Vietnam War. They did not believe that we should have been involved, and so unfortunately,
Very true.
a lot of these fellows came home. home and couldn't even wear, I mean, did you feel safe wearing your uniform?
Well, it's not that I didn't really feel safe. I really wasn't mistreated directly. I mean, I came home wearing, these are my Class A's. This is what I wore as a Class A uniform back then when I came home. But I've heard a lot of stories, of course, and people, soldiers even being spit on and that kind of thing. Of course, even before I went in, there was a lot of uproar about the Vietnam War, and but I can't say I was ever really mistreated. But I will say that I put this uniform away, and I just kind of put it on the shelf, what I thought was permanently, but I didn't get rid of any of my gear, but I rarely would talk about it or discuss it at all until I came. That is very true, and that's called patriotism. For all of you who already know about patriotism, and I'm glad you brought this up. I want all of you to be reminded that each time you see the flag, the American flag, I want you to be reminded of how many people gave their lives to the defense of the freedom that we know in the United States and the lifestyle we pretty much take for granted. And I have to say that joining the VFW kind of brought a whole different level of patriotism to me, and it made me realize that flag represents every American that's ever died for this country. That's the symbol. That's what he was fighting for. He or she was fighting for in foreign lands, and so I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought the meaning of that period to these kids.
You're our heroes now.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We don't really feel like heroes, but we certainly see the heroes of today, the heroes of the Iraqi War and the Middle Eastern wars. We see them, with their limbs lost and their courage and, coming back to the United States, trying to restart their lives with, without their arm or leg or, those kinds of things are very, it's difficult for me. I feel so blessed that I came back in one piece. And there was a lot going on over there, a lot of ways to die in war, and so I just feel totally blessed by God. Do I know anyone? It was certainly going on at the time. It was nothing that I would do. My father served in World War II. My grandfather served in World War I. And yeah, we were seeing draft dodging and such.
When you say draft, I don't know for sure that they know what that is.
Okay. Okay. Explain what I know. Technically I don't know a lot about it, but when you would, back in that time, when you would turn 18 years of age, it was mandatory that you signed up for what was called the draft. And that was the military draft. That was the way that the government replenished or kept the military at full force. And consequently you were on a list, and you had a draft number, and they would draft. The draft board would take a certain number of individuals from this city and that city and all over the United States, and they would call them into service, and that term was you were drafted. And whereas the alternative to that, I mean, you could always join the service, and I knew a lot of men that joined the service. You join the Army for a 3-year period. In the Navy, you would join for a 4-year period, I believe. And so when your number came up, I lived in Independence at the time. When your number was called, they would notify you, through the mail. And you would go to there was a building down on Pershing Street down in Kansas City, Missouri. And you would go in there and join a room full of men and women. Not so many women at the time were drafted. In fact, I don't remember any women in that particular room, but they would draft for the Army, the Marines. Not even so much as the Navy. Men were volunteering a lot of the time for the Navy. It was a bit safer. I mean, they wouldn't agree with that, but really nobody wanted to go into the Army infantry. That was where you got shot. That was where you got. That's where you had a one-way ticket to to Vietnam. So if you were lucky, you got drafted into an MOS that was non-combat. But today, we realize that, yes, the danger is on the ground in the infantry and probably even in the Air Force, of course, as those guys would get shot down or even get captured or be missing in action even, or be POWs, prisoners of war. But what was I going to say? I realize today that the service it works together. All branches work together, and every individual, whether it's in transportation units, whether it's in supply units, whether it's in a naval unit patrolling the Mekong Delta, in the rivers of Vietnam. We all were working together for the same purpose. We're all one as important as the other, and that's teamwork. That's patriotism. That's and it'd be good for all of you to remember that we don't live in this life, as just separate individuals. We depend upon each other quite a lot. More than we realize. So, any other questions or?
I got one more and then.
Okay.
So, you in the Huey helicopter, how big were they?
How big? you could probably put the Huey that we, rode out on and back and forth. Probably you could barely squeeze it into the length of this room, basically. Most of the other helicopter, the Cobra, was about the same length roughly. So.
Well, thank you for taking time to come out and share your story with us today.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's difficult for veterans to live that, and we don't take that for granted. We appreciate you coming out and sharing.
Well, thank you.
Guys, what do we do to our veterans?
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to speak today.